Welcome to the Shun podcast, where we expose religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. The first thing I want to do today is mention that I actually have a new podcast out called Louisville One. That's one word, Louisville One. Obviously, you like podcasts, so what I'm doing is taking my love of deep personal story to my local community to get people's stories and to kind of humanize everyone across the community. Louisville is reflective of many other communities. We're all just people. So I think you might like it. I could really use some likes and subscribes and 5-star ratings to get off to a good start. So I went ahead and released with 3 episodes right out of the gate. I have a YouTube channel for them as well called Louisville One. Imagine that. Again, one word, Louisville One. And you can watch live video recordings of all the interviews that I do. So, sometimes people like to listen to Shunned on YouTube, but a lot of times, the podcast is mostly just a static image and the audio. But these are actual interviews that I'm doing live with video. So, it's a little bit different, and I think you might like it. So, whether you want to just listen in audio format only through a podcast, it'll be available on the regular channels that you find podcasts on, or if you want to watch it on YouTube, then that way you'll get the live video. You're welcome to do that as well. So multiple ways to listen. I just did an event over the weekend, and you can watch me walk through it and talk to people in the community and get their input on issues that we face. And I'm guessing that those issues probably aren't that much different than many of the issues you face in your community. So check it out, and I appreciate anybody that can leave a positive rating or subscribe and get this off to a good start. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our interview for today. Stick around after for an announcement on something new I'm doing to try to allow more people to get help. So let's jump in. Today we're going to meet Renee. This is a story of extreme loneliness played out over decades, surviving an abusive home and life in a cult, and coming out the other side a profoundly compassionate and beautiful person. Renee is an activist in the XJW community today. You might actually know her. Some know her as Renee Cordeschi, JW survivor. So let's go ahead and meet Renee.
My name is Renee. I am 43 years old, and I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm now shunned.
All right, Renee. So how did you come into the religion in the first place? Were you born in, or did you have another way in?
I was born in, so my mum came into the truth, as they explain, as they express, and so I was born in, and I already had 3 older brothers. So by the time I came along, she'd been in it for about 10 years.
Okay, so then were your older brothers also in it for their entire lives, or were they?
No, so my eldest brother was 2 when somebody knocked on mum's door. So yeah, so by the time she was baptized, and by the time I came along, she was right into it for sure. My dad never was a witness.
Really?
But so my mum, joined the witnesses when my eldest was 2.
Do you have any idea what maybe attracted your mom to it?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about this, and there's definitely an interesting story, and it makes me wonder whether DNA has anything to do with you being, attracted to religion. So my mum is a descendant of the French Huguenots. So these people are the people that were persecuted for being extreme in their religion during the French Revolution. So I come from, basically they were religious nutters, and they were expelled from France, and they ended up in Holland. So my mum's Dutch. So way back then, my descendants were very religious people. So, and then my mum's dad was part of a very strict reformed Dutch church where the ladies were only allowed to wear clothes that, went all their way to their ankles and all their way to their wrists. No music was allowed. So she was exposed to very religious people. And then when she came to Australia, she told me, I couldn't find this religion that Dad was part of, or that I was part of. And so, I figured that they weren't the truth. So when the witnesses knocked on her door and told her, the story, she felt that sounded like the way it was, the truth. The reason why I mention all that historical religious extremism as well is I think that Mum had an inclination to look for something that was very involved. And I think, I just really believe that. She also had, look, she left home when she was 17. She was so young. She was 17 and she became an au pair in Belgium from Holland. And her dad had left home when she was 14, so there was obviously issues there. So what I'm trying to say is she came to Australia all by herself when she was 19. So she was clearly a person who was searching for something or lost because she'd lost her dad. And, it just seemed to me like it was the right timing. Now, about my dad, may I go on? Is that all right?
Oh, yeah, go right ahead.
About my dad was a totally different person. He was brought up in Italy in the 30s. He was born, and it was a really difficult time. He was a mountain boy, right in a very remote village up in the mountains, and he had a really terrible life. His dad disappeared for 9 months of the year to find work. Then the war came, and he described to me things like they didn't have enough food, and some in the village resorted to eating their own pets. So it was absolutely horrendous. And because his dad was gone for long periods of time, he sort of became the man of the family. He told me one day that he would take the sheep for the family out in the fields as young as 6. And when he was 9, he would be doing it for 3 days in a row and hiding in little cabins from the cold. And the reason why they had to take sheep out was to find fodder for them because there was no food around.
Oh, wow.
So he had a really difficult upbringing. And when I think his mother also really treated him poorly from what I hear. She was a very manipulative woman and used a lot of emotional manipulation to talk him into doing things. You're the man of the house and we can't do things without you. So that by the time Mum and Dad met, we have this very lost young lady from a very, coming from a very unusual background, and a very unusual man because he was brought up in such an unusual circumstance. So when they finally met, I think it was a recipe for disaster to begin with. And so when a lady knocked on Mum's door, and she offered friendship and comfort, which Mum didn't have because she was in a new country. She'd come to Australia all by herself at 19. So when she was offered this comfort and friendship, I think she jumped at it.
Sure, she was
at
vulnerable.
The opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dad was not a nice guy. I think from what she tells me, even then, he was already fairly just unstable himself from his upbringing and manipulative, and he would try and control her friends and things like that from what she tells me. So sorry.
I was just going to say that's actually an interesting dynamic itself, because there are a lot of relationships inside the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses where you have a very domineering husband who's fairly unstable or just narcissistic or whatever, and then a wife who is codependent with him. And the organization itself has a lot of that in it, where you have these really strong personalities that kind of dominate, and then these followers who are codependent with them. And you see the same relationship dynamics played out sometimes, because I know I saw it at home, and then I went to the Kingdom Hall and I saw it there as well. And it sounds like you kind of did as well.
Yeah, for sure. Codependency is a good word, because I think Mum was, obviously she was new in Australia, a young lady, so she got into a relationship with Dad, needing somebody to cling to. Mm-hmm. But then because he wasn't obviously fulfilling by not being very kind, then the next person who came along, a lovely little old lady, my mum says her name was Grace, a very old lady who knocked on my door, and she was just so kind and lovely. And my mum says, I knew it was Jehovah who sent her to me because she was extremely boring, but the way she delivered the message was so kind and loving that I was attracted to her. So Jehovah sent her to me because he knew that's what I needed at the time. So it's incredible that that's in Mum's own words, that's what she needed.
Yeah, and then, that helps your mom feel special because, Jehovah was looking out for her. And
exactly. And Grace was coming back every week and sitting with her patiently and going through, I think it was the Pink Book at the time, Eternal Life or something. I can't remember what it's called. Yeah. So it was a friendship that possibly Mum was looking for because she was a new immigrant. And probably alone with young kids too. By this time she had my eldest brother, and so she would have needed a bit of support.
Sure, yeah, oh, for sure. And I really like that you mentioned that part that you mentioned about the genetic component of people being attracted to these kind of insular religions or religions that are maybe a little bit on the outside of the normal spectrum. And it just makes me think, my mom's father was actually raised Christian Science, and that is another insular kind of group where they don't believe in going to doctors because you pray and all your health problems will be fixed. Of course, he had heart disease his whole life, and he went to plenty of doctors because he didn't want to die. But you see that. I think sometimes if it's not a genetic component, maybe it's just the way people relate to religion or something, or the way they act in their homes. There's something that they're doing that is passing this little kernel or this core of the need to turn to something like that on through the generations.
Or I totally agree. Or even a feeling of, I've got a feeling that if I join this group, I will be looked after, in the sense that there is a real strong connection among the groups. Like as soon as Mum went to meetings or other people were involved, they immediately helped to look after kids. I remember her saying, they helped me with my young kids. So it's an immediate knowing, a sense of almost a relinquishing of having to make decisions, because if I join this, I will be looked after. That's also what I'm thinking these days is, it's just a feeling that, basically joining a club. Isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And life is hard.
Joining a club.
Joining a club. So life is hard, and these people over here have all the answers. So I'm just going to go over here, and I don't have to think about this stuff anymore. I can just turn my mind and my heart over to these people, and I get all these friends, and people watch my kids, and
exactly. Especially if you're a vulnerable young lady who's just and she would have been vulnerable, leaving home at 17 to become an au pair in Belgium and then coming all the way to Australia at 19. You've got to be running away from something or looking for something anyway, in my opinion.
I agree. That's awful young to be having such great travels. So you then were, I guess, technically in what some would call a divided household. What was the worldview that the religion was giving you, and as a kid growing up, and then how did it work for you? Being in a household. I don't know how your dad, if he was opposed or if he went along with it. How did that kind of work for you?
Well, obviously, when you're growing up, you think that everybody's the same as you. So I grew up thinking that I was, just a normal kid to begin with. My dad wasn't going to the meetings, and my mum explained to me that that was his choice. Of course, we were going to the meetings all the time. So as I was growing up, all my brothers and my mum and I would go to the meetings, and that just became the norm for many years. That's what we would do, and we'd go witnessing. So Mum became, the more Dad dug his heels in of not coming, the more she went along with it, because, that persecution complex, the more she read that we would be persecuted for our beliefs, the more she believed that the more Dad pushed, the more she had to cling on to it, because it was proof that this was the truth, So it was a disaster in that sense that she just really dug her heels in and went along with it even more. So what did it feel like to me? I was really close to my dad, even though he was very unusual in his mental health. He was extremely kind to me. I was the fourth child. I was the only girl. So he was very kind to me. I remember him being very affectionate. He would always hold me and cuddle me, and we'd snuggle up at night on the lounge. And he didn't do that with my brothers, and I think that's because they were older, and I think it's because they were already starting to voice their opinions that Dad wasn't a believer really, and that they stuck to Mum's side, whereas I was very close to Mum as well, but I was very close to Dad, so it was very difficult. I was trying to navigate between the two, feeling a real connection to Dad, but also knowing he wasn't a believer. But I don't think I really understood it as a kid, because I'm talking about age 9 and 10 here. I don't think you really understand. You just go, oh, we're all going to the meeting, but Dad's not coming.
Right.
But I do remember lovely nights when Dad would be really sick or something. He'd have a flu and he'd say, oh, no, I need Renee to stay home because I need her to go and get me a drink of water or something if I need it. I used to love those evenings because I used to get to stay home with him,
Yeah, I'm sure that made you feel special too.
Oh, we were really close, and I really regret that I didn't get to spend much more time with him after that, because he could have really helped me in future, but I'll get to that later anyway as we talk.
Okay. So it sounds like you all had this good relationship. How did it go? I assume, when the holidays might come up or birthdays or things like that. Did your mom just kind of, since she and the kids were all going to the meetings, did you all just kind of act like witnesses, or did your dad do anything as far as that goes?
Oh no, we were very strong witnesses. So my mum was really devout. So that's what I'm saying about this need to join a group and be extreme. I think she had it in her blood. And plus she's Dutch and very strong-willed. By the way, I just want to say that as I'm talking to you, obviously I really love my family. They're beautiful people.
Oh, sure.
And the stories, the things I'm going to explain, I'm explaining it from a point of view of this is what happens. This is the things that, we get embroiled in, and that's just the way it is. So I'm not... my mum's a lovely person, but she just, from her history and everything, she just got caught up in this thing, and she really believed it. So she really made us follow as well. We were very devout. We would not miss a meeting. Like, Dad had to be really sick for me to miss it and really insist. So they were rare occasions. My brothers, as soon as they could, we were witnessing all the time. We were very devout. So it was really a split family. It was. Dad would have felt really lonely. He would have felt extremely lonely because Mum was continually taking us witnessing into the meetings. And when we were home, she was continually reading us bed stories, from the Bible storybook, or praying with us, or talking about Jehovah. She was always talking about Jehovah. I mean, I even remember Dad sitting at the dinner table with a cranky look in his face because Mum would say the prayer and Dad would be, already eating his spaghetti bolognese, and Mum would be finishing the prayer and saying, "Thank you, Jehovah, for the dinner." And Dad would say, it's me who's provided this dinner, not your Jehovah, so things like that. I remember that clearly. So it was... Look, let me say that from my memories, Mum was in charge of that house, and Dad was like a lonely bystander who was just quietly watching his family, embroiled in this massive thing. And it was massive because we spent a lot of time talking about it, and Mum was just really devout.
Yeah, it really dominates your life. It doesn't mean that your mom was a bad person. It doesn't mean that she set out to cause harm.
She was actually, as far as she saw, she was a really good person, because she could have going to bed early. She would have been exhausted with 4 kids, but no, she was really good because she would stay up and read stories, or she'd organise my older brother to read, the Bible stories to me, or she was just always pushing and at it. A very devout person, very...
No, she cared.
Yeah,
she just cared about something that dominated.
Us.
Yeah.
Michael, she was going to save us.
Absolutely.
And Dad wasn't going to stop her.
Yeah, absolutely. She was determined and it dominates.
And in the end, he started getting really, trying to take the car off her or trying to prevent her to going from door to door. He stopped giving her money because he'd say, you're wasting it on the petrol. He'd start to do things where he was just trying to regain some form of control.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I really feel for him. It sounds like, you know, talk about being isolated, when you're isolated in your own house from your kids and your wife, that's tough.
Absolutely. And Michael, what I haven't told you and what I've figured out since I've grown up is, so I told you that Mum and Dad met in Australia. So Mum came out as an immigrant from Holland and Dad came out as an immigrant from Italy, and they met and married. What I didn't tell you is that Dad took us all back to Italy when I was 1.5. So my eldest was like 13 or 14, or I think 13, yeah. He took us all to Italy on a holiday and then hid our passports. And we actually ended up staying in Italy for 9 years.
Wow.
So now I never really reflected too much on it until I was older, and I'm thinking, I think Dad was trying to stop Mum getting involved in this cult.
Yeah.
I think Dad was at that point already, right at the beginning, so she'd been in it, say, 10 years by the time I came into it. I think he'd said, let's go to Italy, and then, because his family's there, he thought, as a desperate thing, if I take the passports off her, then she won't be able to take the kids away and go back to Australia. And I really believe he did that to try and gain control again, to get her out of this religion.
Wow, you really see how it just causes such a struggle for control among everybody.
Yeah, and like I said to you, he was already fairly controlling. Well, I'm thinking that now as an adult, but who knows? Maybe he was just a desperate person.
Yeah, you could see it in different ways.
You can imagine what happened within 2 weeks, of course, because of the wonderful brotherhood.
Worldwide brotherhood.
Mum was right back at it. Within 2 or 3 weeks, she'd found the Kingdom Hall. The first thing she did is she looked up the Kingdom Hall and right back into it. So all this devout time that I'm talking to you about was all in Italy. I grew up in Italy until I was 11.
And did she get... Did she get maybe extra support because now she was in Italy and kind of had this story, of coming from Australia and not really being able to go back? Did the brothers and sisters really rally around her because of that?
Absolutely. Sure. I think they, and she always expresses how beautiful and kind they were. Of course, imagine, a lady turning up with 4 young kids. Australian kids too, so they're all blonde little kids. And I'm not being silly here, but seriously, if you turn up in a community and you stand out, you're different, and they would have lapped it up. They would have, because Mum was tall and Dutch looking, like this tall blonde lady, and she was a lovely lady. She is a lovely lady. So they would have, it just would have been. I know she felt right at home with them for sure. They looked after her. She got very close to all the elders and the elders' wives because as time went on, Dad started getting, imagine he's taken them all to Italy and now they're right back into it, and very devout. And my brothers start getting baptized and they start talking about, no, I won't, go to work with you, Dad, after school. I'm going to become a pioneer. You can just imagine his incredible frustration, and he actually started getting quite manipulative and violent. He started using force, so I started seeing when I was about 11 bruises on Mum's arm and a cut on her face, and she'd always blame it on it was an accident.
Was that acting out or that aggression, was it only directed to your mom or did it involve you and your siblings?
At this stage, he was quite violent with Mum, but I know that my eldest brother, and I really feel for him. I know that Dad was really harsh on my brother. So I'm about 11 and he's about 19. You know, he's finishing high school. He would have been finishing high school. And he was quite good at high school. He was getting great grades because my poor brother, my dad would treat him horrible. I remember my dad would talk him down and say horrible things. And I know he suffered from lack of self-esteem. He would work so hard to try and get some validation at school. So he was getting good marks. I remember him sitting in, we used to share a bedroom because we were poor. We were in housing commission.
Mm-hmm.
And so my eldest brother and I used to share a bedroom, and I used to listen to him. He used to always study right late into the night, like as if he was looking for some meaning. But he put so much effort, and then he would fall asleep to Pink Floyd. You know, and I'm saying that these are all important memories. You know, I think it was a way, and Pink Floyd, I think if Mum knew, she wouldn't have let him listen to it, of course, but he was listening to Pink Floyd because it was that band was a real band about, you know, being suppressed and trying to find your way through, you know, even though you're being suppressed. And I really feel for my eldest brother because my dad used to treat him horribly. My brother used to disappear and go and ride his bike for hours on end so he wouldn't have to be with the family. Mm-hmm. And so to answer your question, yes, my dad was quite violent with my elder brother, very hard on him.
Yeah.
Not as much as Mum. I don't think Mum took most of it.
Sure.
And to begin with, he didn't touch any of my other brothers, but then in the end, what happened was my eldest two brothers got accepted into Bethel. Can you imagine? So my dad finds out that his two beautiful boys, who have, you know, they were 2 years apart, they both got accepted into Bethel at the same time. 19 and 21 they were. And so off they went, and you can just imagine, it just felt like from that moment, and I think maybe also because the big boys of the family were gone, Dad felt like he could get more violent, and that's definitely when things started getting way more violent. And one night we got home from the meeting, so this is just myself and my third brother. Mm-hmm. We got home from the meeting and we walked in, and I remember Dad's mood was just foul, and he had his feet on Mum's favourite coffee table and he had mud on his feet because at this point he didn't care about her at all and he was really mistreating her. And this is a typical domestic violence victim. My mum says, it was my fault because I told him to take his feet off the coffee table. Mm-hmm. And she pulled the table from under his feet and his feet hit the ground. She said, it was my fault. Well, then he just lost it. He just threw the table up and just books were scattered everywhere. Coffee went everywhere. And he just started hacking into my mum. It was very graphic. And then he started hitting my brother in the head over and over. It was just absolutely horrible, Michael. And I was just standing there. He never laid a finger on me, of course, because like I said to you before, we were very close.
Yeah.
You know, my dad, and I do feel terrible. I do feel a lot of guilt.
Like survivor's guilt almost.
Yeah. Yeah, because I very clearly remember him being absolutely horrible to my brothers. And so that night he smashed my mum's face and blood was going everywhere. And so and when he started hacking into my brother, my mum then had to go back and try and pull Dad off him. And so I don't know how we did it, but we managed to jump out of the kitchen window. I remember my brother saying, quick, jump out here. Mum went out through the garage, grabbed the keys and jumped in the car and we took off. And we took off down the street and got away. So it was pretty intense. And we went to the police station that night. And do you want me to keep talking? Because I'm sort of just rabbiting on and on.
No, that's okay. So that's really, I mean, but that paints a really good picture of obviously not your entire experience as a human being in that family, but it paints a picture of what it's like to live in a household where you have that dynamic where one spouse is just completely in the cults, absolutely sold on it all, and taking the kids in it with them, and the other spouse feels completely out of control. Now, obviously, not all unbelieving mates, in quotes, not all unbelieving mates go to the extreme that your father did. And obviously he had a lot of problems, and I don't care what your mom did or your brothers or whatever. Nobody deserves to have hands laid on them like that. That's wrong and should be condemned roundly. But you see the stress that it puts on families, and, what it can lead to, what it can touch off. It's just awful. It's not the way a good family should be, or the way it probably, it would have been interesting to see what your family dynamic could have been, sans Jehovah's Witnesses, without that in the picture. It would be interesting to see what it could have been.
Well, Michael, I think one thing that could have and should have happened is for them to separate early, because they clearly were both people that just were not in a good place. And I'm going to explain this because I think this is important about what the Jehovah's Witnesses do and why it's dangerous, I remember my mum talking to the elders all the time after meetings. She'd be petrified about going home. She'd go, I've got to go home to my husband, and they'd talk her through and sit with her and pray. And I remember them sitting around her and praying and holding Bibles. And I know that they would tell her, you have to stay with him. You have to win him over. And I do remember them saying things like, make sure you cook him beautiful meals, and make sure that you're looking after him in the bedroom, and make sure that he's getting what he needs, because he is a man after all. And just saying things like, just perpetuating it as if it was up to mum to be responsible for how he behaved. And that's just really playing into the victim's, blaming situation. It's just absolutely horrendous, because I saw it firsthand. We should have left a long time earlier, but mum kept saying, no, I've got to be a good wife. No, I can't leave. No, it's my fault. It was my fault I took that coffee table from under his feet. It was my fault that I did this and that, and if I hadn't been so back chatty, maybe he wouldn't have hit me as much. And, it's just incredible. So I'm very angry and disappointed, especially when that article came out recently, that culture and those policies still persist. That policy that no, or not policy because they don't say it per se.
But they know what they're doing.
I saw it lived firsthand, the culture that no, you can't leave your husband. You have a responsibility to try and win him over, to become, come into the truth, even if your life is in danger.
Yeah,
So I'm just glad. Yeah, I'm just glad that night mum made this decision of, okay, now it's enough. It's been 23 years of abuse, and I think that is enough.
And so they separated at that point, or divorced?
Yeah. So we didn't go back. The brothers and sisters put us up for a little while. And in the meantime, mum organised to get passports done again. And she basically, she couldn't put us on a plane because she was worried that Dad would find out and the authorities would intercept. So what we did is we took an overnight train to Holland, a midnight train to Holland, so that nobody knew. I remember one of the elders and his wife dropped us off at the train station, and off we went. We disappeared without Dad knowing into Holland. And when we got to Holland, my mum's mum, because she's from there, viewing mum as a domestic violence abuse victim, helped finance all of us going back to Australia to the house that we had there, because all along we had a house there that mum and Dad had purchased when they were younger.
Wow. So
we all flew back to Australia.
Wow, that's really kind of a harrowing tale. Everyone is fortunate that someone didn't get killed in that situation, really, because they push women to stay with these abusive men, and Jehovah's Witnesses like to throw the term blood guilt around a lot, and you have to wonder how much blood guilt is on their hands from people who have truly had their lives ended at the hands of an abusive person because they won't let them leave. I mean, I remember my dad was never abusive, never physically abusive. He was mentally and emotionally, but I remember my mom saying things like, I almost wish he would hit me because then I'd have grounds, or then I'd have a reason to leave, or something like that, which, obviously nobody really truly wants that. But you see that the organization puts these people in a situation where they have to stay in absolutely miserable marriages. And what are the fruits of that? It's nothing good. Doesn't get better usually.
And not only that, like I think about all my brothers and myself and how it's affected us, because like I said to you, I really feel for my eldest because I think he just was treated so badly, and that doesn't go away. I know he's in his 50s now, and that sort of stuff you don't grow out of. It stays with you. And also my third brother was such an unhappy child. He used to be so he used to do very strange things. Like one time he packed this suitcase, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "You just never know when one day we're just going to have to escape. So I'm just putting everything in there just in case we have to really quickly escape one day." And, and that's always stuck in my mind. Which 13 or 14-year-old does that, and he used to do things like I'm going to try and jump out of the second-story building just to see if I can do it. He used to do just things like that. It was just a cry for help, in my opinion. And he did jump, by the way, out of the second-story building.
Oh, wow.
And he gained my utmost respect that day because I was at the bottom waiting for him. And he's going, "Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'll show you."
Now,
and he did do it.
Did he think that he was going to have to escape your father or witness the end of the world?
No, what I'm saying, I think he just was doing dangerous things because everybody responds differently to this situation. I think he was just tempting fate or testing or trying to see how far you could take things. And I remember there's all these signs, that kids do. I remember I took a belt to school with all studs on it. I'd found this belt with studs on it, those fashion belts.
Yeah.
And I went to school and I told all my mates that my dad was bashing me with this belt, and which is absolutely horrible. I'm horrified that I did that. But that was my way of trying to tell people, hey, in my house, things aren't so great.
Yeah.
And I need you to help me, but I didn't know how to say that,
Yeah, it was your own cry for help.
Yeah. So all these things, it just shows that domestic violence really cannot be perpetuated. They really that policy really or culture really needs to be looked at because it just really impacts kids. It certainly does.
Yeah,
it certainly does.
Yeah. So you had all this going on at home. What was life like for you growing up at school? And were you? You talked about going and taking the belt in there, but what about as a young witness in school? Were you sound like being such a devout family that maybe were you the type who witnessed a lot, or how'd you get along with others?
Yeah, so I was your very devout. What do you call it? My auntie once called me, not my non-witness auntie once called me this word. Well, you're so devout that you're painful. Anyway, that was me. I can't think of the word.
Okay.
But obsessive,
Right.
So, yeah, I used to go to school and I was a very timid, shy person, and I knew that everybody at school was bad, and so I would avoid them like the plague. I would sit on my own. And, I remember sitting under the pine needle trees, and I used to make chains out of the pine needles, sitting quietly by myself. And for a while it worked, that nobody bothered me. But then I do remember a story of these boys coming up to me and saying, "Hey, Renee, come with us. We want to show you something. Come with us, come with us. Oh, but we have to blindfold you." And they blindfolded me, and they walked me backwards into a great big turd. a dog poo, and then all laughed. And seriously, apart from that was the only interaction I remember in that school. This is when I was little in Italy, so this is primary schools.
Yeah.
I was very, very solitary at school. And then when I went to
and that's going to attract
Adelaide,
bullies, when you stand out in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I tried to though. No, I think I was really good at staying under the radar and hiding in places where I wasn't really visible, or being really quiet in class.
Mm-hmm.
In Adelaide, when we went to Adelaide, once we came to Australia, so my mum took us to Adelaide, she actually applied for me to go to the best school in the area. And I actually had to do like an entrance test, and I got in. I was really lucky I got in. And it was a really fancy school, and that's where I really felt isolated because, I really wasn't part of the world. I sat for a little while with a group of girls. And by the way, I'm going to drop a name. Are you ready?
Okay.
I went to school with Sia.
Really?
Yeah. Do you know Sia, don't you?
Yeah, the music artist.
So we were both in year 7, and I sat with her just for a tiny bit. So probably about a month. When I first started, I thought, well, I've got to sit somewhere. So I sat in this little quiet group of which this beautiful blonde little girl was there, and she was sitting there, and I sat there for a while. But really, they were so different to me because they spoke about parties and boyfriends and makeup and all that, and that was just a totally different world to me. I did none of those things, so I didn't stay there long. I left that group and went and sat with the outcasts. I was very good at finding outcasts like myself, quiet people, unassuming people, and sort of sitting near them but not really being with them because I couldn't. They were of the world.
Right.
They were dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very solitary time. That school was very, very solitary, and I really felt different. And most people left me alone. But I then started to get picked on by this girl. She was quite an obese girl, and I was extremely skinny, and I think she decided to start picking on me, and I started dreading going to school. At this time, Michael, my dad died too. We got news from Italy that Dad had a massive heart attack and died.
Oh, wow.
He had been planning. He'd made a passport. He had been planning to come. He was going to come in about 3 or 4 months' time to visit us all. But he died. So I just really disconnected and had trouble at school, and I started getting extreme anxiety and depression, and to the point where I could no longer get up and go to school. I just felt not a part of school. I just felt really disconnected, and that everybody hated me, and that I wasn't worth absolutely nothing, and just hated going there. So then Mum decided, okay, the problem's the school. The girls must be bullying you. We'll change school for you, which was pretty sad because I went to a local school, which was nowhere near as nice as the school I was at. So the school I was at was blazers and ties,
Yeah.
And I went to and Sia. By the way, she would have no idea who I am. Hey? Absolutely, because I only sat with her with just a few lunches, and soon decided that, man, these kids are way too cool for me. I sensed straight away they did not want me around them. Not that she was like that. No way. I'm not trying to say that. But what I'm saying
Right, I
is
understand what you're saying.
felt
Yeah, you
I
felt
just
that way.
did not.
Sure.
Yeah, I just not feel part of this group.
Sure.
I felt like I was an ugly lump, really.
I understand.
So when I changed schools, I went to a really and another reason why I felt really outcast is I think it's another JW thing too.
Oh, sure.
My mum couldn't afford to buy me the proper uniform at this school. So this was a fancy school. I got in for free because it was a public school. I not auditioned, what's the word? I did tests, and yes, I was able to get in. But she, of course, couldn't afford the uniform. So the first thing she did is bought me secondhand items. Now, these beautiful jumpers, navy jumpers, had a beautiful crisp white stripe around the V-neck and around the cuffs. So it was blue, white, blue. But unfortunately, because we were poor, mine was blue, grey blue from all the washing, that the previous owners. So, and my pleated skirt was not threadbare, but it was old and faded. And so straight away, and there is poverty amongst witnesses. I'm going to be honest.
Absolutely.
A lot of witnesses, there is poverty. That's another reason why I was also an outcast, because I looked like an outcast.
Oh, man.
Yeah, we couldn't afford.
Yeah, I completely identify. I went to a school that was very preppy, where I lived in Louisville, Kentucky, and all of my clothes were from secondhand, and not even like the good secondhand stores. And I got it constantly. I was picked on all the time because I stood out visually. I didn't look like the other kids. Not only was I different religiously, but I couldn't afford the things that they could. And yes, that definitely sets you up as a target. Yeah.
And I probably was a little bit different. I wasn't totally picked on because what I used to do is hide. I was very good at hiding. So I'd find places where people couldn't find me. I was often in the library or just sitting in corners where nobody would really sort of notice you. So I became really very good at trying not to be noticed.
Yeah, I even to this day try not to be noticed at a lot of places. I understand. I understand.
Yeah, which is a shame, isn't it? So different from becoming vibrant young children that we should have become. But anyway, and when I changed high school, the same thing. I went to hide and not. And by the way, when I went to this high school, which was not a fancy high school, it was actually quite rough. I was horrified because now I'd found these truly worldly people, people that would rape and steal from you. So I really hid and tried to be nobody there. And so I stayed at that school, and I began to have a lot of absences because, the problem wasn't the first school. The problem was me.
Sure.
I was the problem. Changing school was not going to change anything. In actual effect, I went to a worse school and missed out probably on the education the other school would have given me. But so what happened is I started having so many absences that the counsellors contacted my family and my mum and had to go to a counsellor, and I developed anorexia because I was so miserable and I self-loathed myself so much that I started to stop eating properly. And that's when mum decided, we better homeschool you.
Okay, I gotta point something. I gotta point one thing out, and I just want to say, and I know you didn't probably mean it in this way, but you said I was the problem, and you may not have meant it as though you yourself were the problem. Just the problems were internal, but you weren't the problem here. You were just a symptom of a bigger problem. The behaviors you were manifesting, and whether it was anorexia or just not going to school and things like that. Those were problems that came from circumstances and situations that were beyond you, and that impacted you. But they weren't you. They were just something around you that fed or actually didn't feed you. And I just have to point that out because, yeah, that wasn't, it just wasn't you. You were worth more than that. And,
yeah, that's kind. And I know I'm spending a lot of time trying to think that way too. But really at the time, what happens is you become very, and I did, and I'm not saying everybody does, but just the character I was, the way I took things very literally, I just really decided that, yeah, I was a really bad person.
Oh, I understand. I got there myself.
Yeah, that I was just, yeah. Anyway, so, no, but I'm hearing you. And what happened is, so then I became homeschooled, and that was a disaster because Mum kept pioneering, and I was home all alone, and I actually started getting to very, very, very black, in a very black place. I was very, very depressed.
Mm-hmm. I bet.
I think if I had known about suicide, I'm glad I sort of didn't know, because at this stage, I wasn't probably smart enough or whatever. I probably, I didn't know about suicide, but the next closest thing is I was just in a very, very black place and listening to, of all things, Mozart's Requiem Mass, which is a mass for the dead.
Oh, wow. I didn't know what that was. Wow.
And I learned Latin. I have to say, Michael, I learned Latin in that year because the whole Requiem is in Latin.
Oh, wow.
And I was just fascinated, and I taught myself how to understand the Requiem. Well, I only know the Latin of the Requiem, of course.
Right. Well, I have to ask you, did anybody get you help for the anorexia? Or was it expected to just go away?
I think my mum spoke to the elders, and I can't remember if the elders spoke to me. At this point, I don't think my mum knew. Look, she would often say to me, "You won't get any better wisdom than from Jehovah's organization."
Right.
That's definitely featured in there. Sure. Eventually, I did go and see somebody. My mum did take me to somebody because, I really got in a mess. And when I was 17, when I learned how to drive, I actually took my car to a paddock, a secluded paddock, and I had a hose with me, and I'm not 100% sure I was going to do it, but I had an option. I took that car there, and I said to myself, I can do this. If I really need to, I'm ready. I can do it now. But I didn't, obviously.
Good. I'm glad you didn't.
We can laugh about it now. But
sure.
So, look, I just got in a really bad place, and I think I started seeing somebody then. But even when I did, I wasn't able to explain that. The real reason behind it. They were just asking me all questions about myself, but really, if I knew then what I knew now, I'd be able to say, hey, listen, I've grown up in this really restrictive cult. They've allowed this to happen. I've had a lot of domestic violence, and I'm really feeling trapped, and I just cannot cope. I think if I was able to put the spin of the whole this is my upbringing and why I'm so confused, then I think they would have been able to help me. But at that point, I just went there and said, yeah, look, my dad's died and I really miss him. And that was, okay, but I think there was just a lot more. There was a lot more to it that they did not know.
Yeah, and you're discouraged from, the articles and such in the Watchtower would often discourage people. They would discourage going to a therapist, but eventually they got a little less discouraging on that, but even then they would encourage you not to talk about the religion any. And so we were taught not to be open about that. Yeah,
to be honest, Michael, I do remember that. I didn't want to bring reproach on Jehovah's name.
That's what they said.
But also, at that point, I didn't know that was my problem anyway. I
Right. Of
think,
course, you're a kid.
I was just trying to work out what is my problem. I don't know what my problem is.
Yeah, you're a kid. You're in this thing in this religion that is telling you that it's right. So if it's right and you're not happy, the problem must be you. You must be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So just so many. The sad part of it is spending, what's that? Probably 21 years of just such extreme self-loathing,
Oh, yeah.
And that's a disaster because it creates a lot of work later to heal.
Oh, yeah, and it's 21 years of your formative years, It's what you were brought up on. It's no way to live.
And also what I sort of would describe it is, and the reason why I was in a bad place, I think as a witness, you live a really sort of muted life. It's like a grey scale.
Yes.
It's like a
Kingdom Hall. There's no color in it. It's just, everything is bland and there's no windows.
And there's so much suppression and so much of all of that I think basically the reason why I was getting into a hole is just not being able to be myself.
Absolutely.
Not being able to flourish, but rather being, quashed in a way.
Yeah.
And being very isolated too, because, apart from the people in the Kingdom Hall, which I wasn't having great relationships with friends there at the time. There was one girl that was really nasty. Apart from that, I had nobody else. I'd lost my dad. I really missed my dad, Michael, because my dad was so close to me. And even though I tried to say, well, he was horrible because he did that to Mum, I just still really missed him, because we were very, very close.
It's not all of who he was. Humans are complex and can have bad behaviors, and it doesn't mean that that's the entirety of who they are. And obviously you knew a different side of him. And it doesn't sound like you ever really got to maybe fully grieve him or his loss, or maybe didn't get closure, because of the distance and everything. I would imagine that would be difficult.
I was able to visit his grave later, which was amazing. So I was able to go there, and it was incredible to connect with him there. Like, I know that sounds ridiculous, but you know what I mean.
No, I understand. And was that as an adult or?
I know, I know what you mean about closure. I was 21. I know what you mean about closure. It just felt like I was just sat there and talked to him, for ages. It was just the most amazing thing because, like you said, I hadn't had a chance to, be near him before that. So
I understand.
It was just fantastic to be able to do that.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to tell you too, Michael, growing up as well, I developed this very strange behaviour. And it might have been obviously related to the domestic violence, but I became very clingy to Mum. I remember as a young kid, and even as I grew older, I used to have to hold on to Mum, and I'm not sure whether it was what I'd seen Dad do to her, and I just had to I always sat on her lap and always held her and just constantly. It was ridiculous to the point that when I got older, Mum said, well, you're going to have to stop doing this now because you're too old. You can't sit on my lap anymore. It's ridiculous. So it was just this weird, incredible need to physically be next to her and touching her because I just felt so scared. There's this feeling of scared that's been with me all my life. And I know that as a child and a young teenager, the way I managed that scared feeling was to hold her all the time.
That makes sense.
As I had to let go of her, and it was such a hard day when she told me that because I thought, well, how am I going to manage these feelings that I have? I'm feeling so scared.
Yeah, and nobody's teaching you here how to manage these feelings. There's no emotion. This is an emotional desert.
It was just like, you're going to have to let go and you're going to have to grow up. But I was just like, but how do I manage these? It was just crazy. And actually those feelings are the feelings that come back to me when I have panic attacks now. So it's obviously all tied together to just not getting the help, like you said, at the right time by the right people. I really believe that, or allowing that domestic violence to perpetuate. So those two things we can clearly say that the witnesses are lacking in that because they need to, A, deal with the domestic violence issue, and B, allow people to get the therapy that they need, and to go to professionals.
Yeah, and they need to encourage it. Yeah, they need to encourage that. The elders have no business handling that stuff. How did you progress to, do you remember, I don't know what age you were, but what was going around along the lines of when you got baptized? Was there anything that was going around that time that was going on, or what kind of led you to the point where you actually took that step and solidified your relationship with the witnesses?
Yeah, so I was only 12 when I got baptized, so I was fresh-ish out of Italy. I just come to a new country in Australia.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And we joined the Prospect congregation in Adelaide, and we just the hard thing was trying to get close to all these people because, as you know, people in Italy are very affectionate people. They're very
okay.
Well, it's that Mediterranean style.
Sure.
So when we came to Adelaide, which is a very English, and no offense to English, but you know what I mean. It's a bit more.
I understand. People have different personalities in different areas, and stereotypes are based on some truth. So,
yeah. So I don't know upset anybody, but yeah, it just felt to me a lot colder, and I remember always trying to find somebody to cling to and be friends to, and my brothers made a friendship. They were pioneering. They made a friendship with this boy who was their age, so he was about 24, and I had a crush on him, and he was a pioneer, and all the Kingdom Hall were talking about were making the truth your own, and I just all my brothers had been baptized by this stage because my third brother was 15, so he was baptized. It just felt like it was my turn. It just felt like it was the thing I had to do. So sure. And I wanted to impress this boy who was 24. I had a crush on him. So I got baptized at 12. I don't even remember. I know that I did not make a dedication, because I didn't even know the meaning of it all. I just remember going through the questions, and one of the elders did say, in actual effect, I think you're too young. I wish he would have pushed that, but the other two elders overrode him, or the other elder overrode him, and off I went and got baptized.
Were you, afterward, were you at any point used as an example or anything? Because that is pretty young. Did you end up, on a convention part or an assembly part or anything like that?
I never got to do an assembly part. I'm really regretting that, though. No, but Michael, because my brothers had been in Bethel, in Rome, and now again, they were heading off to Bethel in Sydney, and all my family was pioneers. Mum was a pioneer, and she was really devout. She was quite vocal. She was always out witnessing. There's a joke that they used to call her Elder Erica because, of if she'd been male, she would have been an elder, sort of thing. So our family was basically, and we were arrogant in a way about it. We were the example family.
Yeah.
We were.
I figured.
We were the marvelous family. Wow. Or so I thought. Now that you go back looking for people, nobody ever remembered us. So.
Oh, really?
we thought we were pretty.
Oh, that's funny.
We were pretty amazing, and we were arrogant and elitist about it, to be honest, because sure. When we were all pioneering and all doing parts at meetings, and my brothers were in Bethel. I know that sounds terrible, but yeah, we.
Well, no, when you're in an organization like that, the only way that you can kind of have anything that's your own is to try to aspire to do more so that you can, have an identity. You're a Bethelite or you're a pioneer.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just a publisher with everybody else and whatever. You kind of. Exactly. Yeah, our ego needs something to cling to, something to identify with, and some way to stand out. So that's all you have. There's not much else you can do. And do you think that were you all on maybe some level doubling down because of, just the circumstances in your home? Maybe giving the witness stuff more attention as an escape from some of what you were facing when you went home?
Look, I think the reason why we were so devout is because Mum had escaped Dad, and now finally she kept telling us, Jehovah's given us these conditions and now we owe him. He saved us, and now we owe him to really paying back for all the wonderful things he's done for us. So it was more of a, we owe Jehovah because he's so marvelous, and so we just. I'm not sure if I addressed the question that you asked, but
no, that makes sense. That makes sense. You just put it a different way, but yeah, it was like you owe Jehovah because, like you said, you all escaped.
We were emancipated now, and all thanks to Jehovah. So now we owed him, to dedicate our lives. And for Mum, it was all or nothing. And when my brothers first came to Australia, because they came first, my two oldest brothers came first on the plane, and went to the house and set it up, make sure, got rid of the tenants that were in there and sort of cleaned it up. And when we arrived 2 months later, my brothers, when we arrived from the plane, we were picked up and we arrived at where my brothers were staying. They weren't witnessing. It was a Saturday morning and they weren't witnessing. They were there playing table tennis. And I remember my mum going off and saying, we haven't come all the way from Italy and survived all that persecution for me to now come here, and you're in the land of milk and honey, and you can think that you can stay and not go witnessing. And I think they said something like, but we went for an hour and a half. An hour and a half? Are you kidding me? That's not enough, So my mum was just really, you have no idea. She's really strong-willed,
That sounds
but
like it.
She was devoted.
Yeah.
She was so devoted. She really felt we owed Jehovah everything. So,
just out of curiosity, and in all the hours that you all spent out witnessing, between your brothers and your mom, yourself, did anyone ever come into the organization through your efforts?
I think Mum has either one or two people.
Really? I just wonder.
And that's it.
Because it sounds like there was a lot of vigorous devotion to it. So I was just wondering if there was any, produce at the end, any fruitage of that.
No, except for 4 children born in.
Right.
So no, not really. I know she definitely helped a lady in Italy. She got baptized. And then in Australia, I think she helped a lady who was already sort of doing it. She solidified and helped her to, baptize, I think.
Gotcha.
So I think that's all there is, yeah.
So how did your life play out, as you get into your teenage years, young adulthood, and then, that you talked a little bit about school, but and some of the stuff that was going on in your life personally, as you're getting to that point where you're going to graduate high school and go on about life, how did that kind of develop for you?
So school was just something I had to do because the end was coming, and my mum's attitude was, do your best while you're there, but it's not your main focus. You should study your magazines first, get your schoolwork done second. Despite that, and because of that attitude, I hardly attended. My attendance in the end when I graduated was 70%. And I remember one of my teachers kindly had to write to the Board of Studies to permit me to graduate because anything below a certain amount, and I wouldn't have been allowed to graduate. And in my final year, I actually did really well academically. I know you did really well, Michael. I know you your stories. You had really high results.
Yeah.
I got offered a position in a university purely because of my results in high school. They said that the top 5 kids or whatever would get a position automatically. And I remember getting that letter, and I remember looking at it saying, oh, well, Mum's going to say no, of course, because we can't do it. And I thought, I'll just take it home and just sort of at least skite the fact that I got offered it,
Right.
and I showed Mum, and she said, "Oh, for heaven's sakes, why would you want to get man's knowledge, when we've got all of Jehovah's publications and all our training through that? Why on earth would you need to do that?" And I said, "Yeah, of course," and laughed it off
Right.
and threw it away. Actually, and then I still, for fun, applied for universities, and I did get all the choices that I put down, and I sort of toyed with the idea that, because I did love studying, as you would have, when you have
Oh, yeah.
results and you do
Right.
well, you do entertain the idea, but it would be nice to do that. But of course, I threw it away because even though I got those offers, I knew I was going to just do something part-time and pioneer.
Yep. So is that so? I understand. I threw mine away and pioneered too.
Yeah.
So how did that go for you? I mean, so you, how did you accept that? Was your heart in it? Did you kind of wish you had gone to school at the time? Like myself, I fully bought into everything I had been taught, so I thought I was doing the right thing. And what about you? Did you kind of feel that way?
So when I graduated, Mum actually, because we'd had such a significantly difficult time financially in Italy with Dad. Dad had trouble finding work. It's very hard in Italy, very, very hard, especially in our little community. So because of that, Mum let us do part-time studies at TAFE. TAFE is like a mini college. So she let me do that part-time while I auxiliary pioneered. And I chose a course which was totally stupid. I just did it because my brothers had done it. Again, I think as a witness, you just sort of rely on anything, just whatever, so long as it pays the bills. And I really didn't enjoy it. But when I was witnessing, I do remember, so this is when I'm 17, this is, I think, when things started to happen. Oh, by the way, I'm going to drop another name. Would you believe that Paul Grundy came to our congregation? Paul Grundy from JW Facts.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, he was a Bethelite, and he'd been moved from another congregation to our congregation because our congregation was a bit more serious. And so he was appointed to our congregation, and he was a rascal, of course, and he brought a new spark to our congregation. And so I think, and Mum is going to blame Paul Grundy for affecting me. Is she right? I'm not sure, but he brought this new spark. And when I was going witnessing, I just didn't feel right. I was witnessing, going from door to door, and I remember that sick feeling of, I'm telling people about this, and I don't think I even want to. I don't think I even really, I believed it, but I just didn't want to be telling people about it. I didn't want to. I just didn't feel right. Maybe that's cognitive dissonance. Something in my head was saying, I don't really believe it, but I do believe it. It's kind of hard to explain.
No, I understand.
Yeah, so I did that for a little while, witnessing. I just started really hating it and not wanting to do it, but I had to do it because I had to put in the hours. And I think, and I started watching people on the platform as they spoke, and I just started really not believing what they were saying. There was an elder who was extremely effeminate, and I was sure he was gay, even though we were not allowed to. So I just was thinking to myself, how can you pretend not to be gay when you're clearly I don't know. I know you can't judge people on on how they look, and I don't want to do that. But I'm just saying, just things started to not feel right. Like people were doing things for the wrong reason or disingenuinely.
Did you see a lot of fake people around you?
No, well, I was always really optimistic, and I'm thinking Jehovah's, accepts all sorts. But yes, you know what? One thing that really, let's say, stumbled me was we had to sacrifice so much, as you know. You can just imagine, right?
Sure.
And there was this family, an elder's family, and he was financially really well off. There was a couple of elders that were really well off, and they went to from Australia, Whistler, Canada, and then they'd go to Disneyland, and then they'd go to Vanuatu for holidays all the time. They were just really enjoying, and none of them were pioneering, really enjoying their life. And they had kids my age, and and they had a beautiful dad and mum and a beautiful family, beautiful house, beautiful car. I just felt like, why don't I have this? Why, I felt really sad that I didn't have a family and a dad like that and everybody happy and going on holidays. And I thought, how does that work? Why did we sacrifice so much? And they're going to go to paradise as much as we are, because we were really pushing and pioneering. Why are we sacrificing so much?
Yeah, you don't get extra credit.
Yeah, why are we doing so much? And I know it sounds like I'm just being jealous, and I'm sure I was jealous because I just really wanted to be part of this family. It was a beautiful family.
Sure.
And it seemed quite functional. It was quite functional. So I just really missed that. And it just didn't make sense to me. Did not make sense. It just all felt disingenuous and different standards for different people. And that, why had we suffered so much?
Yeah.
For this, why had we put up with dad's violence? And
well, yeah, you're told that there's this God that's looking after you, especially if that he's going to bless you if you do the right things, and they're telling you what the right things are and you're doing them. And why do families then turn out so differently based upon performance? It doesn't work that way. So that's very hard to swallow.
And really, Michael, I was really lonely. Like I said, I didn't have a dad. I really wanted a dad. At this point, it was really impacting on me. I really, and I used to be so sad at all the, I just really wanted my friend's dad to treat me like his daughter, and he couldn't because he just didn't have that capacity. He wasn't that way inclined, and he had his own kids, and I just felt really sad and really lonely, and I just couldn't make heads or tails of life.
Yeah, there's one thing you haven't said a lot. It sounds like your dad was, you all were so close. Did you have many friends? I haven't heard much about friends. Did you have many friends as especially as you got older?
To be honest, yes, look, I had in Adelaide, I had and I was there from age 11 to 15, and if I'd stayed there, I think I would have been fine, because in that congregation there was a girl, her name was Linda, and her dad, who's now deceased unfortunately, he was fantastic. He did treat me like a daughter. So I became best friends with Linda, and he would treat me like a daughter, and he was amazing. He would treat me like a daughter so much as getting me to do jobs around his house, go and do this in the backyard, go and do that. It was truly, go and wash the dishes. It was truly, I felt like I was part of their family. But unfortunately, when my brothers moved to Sydney, because when my brothers went to Bethel in Sydney, then my mum sold up and we all went to Sydney, and I lost that connection. And when I came to Sydney is where this wealthy elder was there, and I became friends with his daughter, really close, and they were lovely. They were a beautiful family. But that's where I just really wanted that love again from the father, and he wasn't giving it to me. I just wanted him to treat me like the other guy was treating me, like give me jobs, make me feel part of the family.
Yeah. I think I was asking about the friends because I wondered if maybe you had any other close relationships that might give you some of what the relationship you had with your father might have been, just some of that closeness.
A little bit in a couple, like in a girlfriend. I always had just one friend, basically, usually.
Okay.
Because I was, But when I moved to Sydney, then I didn't have that closeness. And I know this guy's lovely. If he heard this, he'd be really sad. But it just was not in his capacity.
Sure.
In his character to do that. And it's not his job,
No.
So that's when I started really missing a dad, because that's when I felt really, really, like I said, do you know how I was clinging to mum?
Yeah.
Like, and I couldn't do that anymore. I was like a lost soul looking for somebody to latch onto.
No, I understand. No, you mean you were just a hurt person, a hurt young girl. I mean, that's
Yeah.
That's heavy stuff. That's tough. It was obviously that pain was manifesting in your life in different ways, and you weren't getting the help that you needed, and you weren't getting the comfort from this thing you were involved in. Nothing was really feeding you. It doesn't sound.
My mum would argue different. My mum would say, "Oh, we had lots of elders who would have been happy to help you, and." But I think you can't force a friendship. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. There's a special connection that I had with that father figure that I lost, and you can't make that again. It just happened, because we clicked. And trying to find that again in Sydney, it just didn't happen. And it didn't happen, Michael, until I started working. And when I started working, because I'd chosen a stupid field that my brother has, mechanical engineering, I ended up working in very male-dominated fields.
Oh wow, yeah.
And basically, I started to get attention from older males. Because I was a young 21-year-old.
Yeah.
20-year-old. I started to get attention from older males, and this is going to segue into the next question you've got, isn't it?
How did your adulthood play out before you left the religion?
Yeah. Well, the people that helped me emotionally, that I was looking for, always ended up being married older men. This is when I was 20, that is. And so I got attached to an older man, and then so Mum found out, and of course I changed jobs because that was the wrong thing, and of course, I knew, no, you can't do that. So then I went to a new job, and again, this older man started flirting with me and showing me attention. And, it was just wonderful because somebody cared, and somebody liked me, and somebody thought I was marvelous, and we started meeting in a park. We'd go to the park and we'd kiss, and then, of course, the first time I did that, straight away, I knew I'd done the wrong thing, so I went straight to the elders. And I said, this is what's happened. It's a married man, and of course it was a disaster. It was terrible, blah, blah, blah. So they set up a judicial meeting for me because this had been the second married man that I'd been, shown an interest to. So then they encouraged me not to do it again, and of course, next week this guy invites me to the park again. We go to the park again and we kiss, and I go straight back to the elders, Michael. I go straight back and I say, I've been bad again. And so they have another, the second meeting, explaining that what I'm doing is totally wrong and it has to stop immediately. And of course, at this stage, I've lost interest in witnessing.
Yeah.
I'm totally lost. I'm trying to pioneer, but I'm not interested. Pioneering felt fairly lonely, So anyway, we met one more time. So they had a quick meeting. It had been the third time that I'd done this, so they came back to me and they said, we're going to have to disfellowship you. And so that's what they did. We're going to have to announce it next Thursday.
And what did that feel like?
Michael, I trusted Jehovah. I was shocked. I seriously thought they were not going to do it. I really believe they weren't, because in my mind, all the magazines and the pictures, they talked about sleeping over and staying over. You know how all the pictures of the man getting up in the morning and leaving the place because he stayed there overnight.
Yeah, all their illustrations.
They'd slept together. I hadn't slept together. I had just been kissing, a guy.
Right.
But he was married. They kept telling me that was really, really bad. That was worse.
Yeah, but also nobody's seeing what's going on here.
Yeah. In my mind, it wasn't that bad. So when they said, we're going to disfellowship you, I reasoned, okay, well, this is the Holy Spirit. These men, this is not the men making decisions. This is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit knows me, and the Holy Spirit knows that I must be a really bad girl, because otherwise they wouldn't have disfellowshipped me. So I am a really bad girl. And so that's what I decided, that, that all these years I knew I was the scum of the earth, and this disfellowshipping me basically validated or confirmed that I truly was the scum of the earth and I needed to be disfellowshipped and be gone.
Yeah. That's so damaging.
Yeah.
That's I'm so sorry. That's just so awful. It's it just
the scum of the earth, Michael, and that's what I've had to live with for a long time. That's why it's so damaging. That's why this policy is hurting so many people, because you truly believe that it's Jehovah and his Holy Spirit deciding for you who you are.
Yeah, and I mean, through this whole life that you've led to this point, nobody is giving you anything that you need, and you're being isolated or feeling isolated, and it's such an unfair situation, because the way that you act in school, you're going to be isolated, and people are going to treat you a certain way, which isn't going to help your self-esteem. And then you've got all this stuff going on at home, and then the way your mom is kind of dictating your life, and it sounds like she was pretty militant about how devoted you should be. And it's like, where in life does Renee get to be good enough? Is there anywhere in here that Renee, just by being Renee, by virtue of being Renee, gets to be enough? And there's nowhere in here where that exists. And now here you are before these men that you found, I guess, some men who made you, for at least a little bit, feel like you were enough. And then it ends up in you being shunned. And once again, now, Jehovah has told you you're not enough. I mean, it's just, it's a very difficult pattern in life to overcome, where you're always made to feel less than, or like I said, like you're just not enough. And it's the whole not enough thing is a pattern that you see throughout the ex-Jehovah's Witness community when you talk to people who felt that way. And I'll raise my hand as well. It's just so sad. And then to have this judicial, quote, ruling come down on you, I mean, it's just, how much lower can it go?
Yeah, for sure. And it stays for so long. It's so hard to get rid of that self-worth.
Yeah.
Once you reach certain milestones, and all those milestones seem to point that, you really aren't worthy to be alive.
Yes.
And you carry that through all through your life, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's like you're always trying to prove yourself. Yeah.
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 Sure.
Yeah. Look at me. I did something. I'm worthy now. It's just, it's,
and I wished at the time that, I was going to fall in love with young men, but I wasn't looking for, in all this, I can honestly say I was not looking for sex, and I was totally not interested in young men, because they were foolish young people. Not foolish, but they're just young people being young people. I was looking for a dad. I know that. I was looking for somebody who was going to hug me and hold me and say, do you know what? You're going to be okay. That's all I was looking for, is a hug.
Yeah.
But unfortunately with men and the way they are, obviously hugs are not enough.
Right.
But I can honestly and truthfully say, and that's, I think, one of the things that makes you reflect that the Holy Spirit really isn't at work, because if the Holy Spirit truly knew me and truly knew my heart, that I was just truly looking for somebody to make me feel safe and not scared anymore. That's all I wanted. If it truly knew that, it would understand. I can reflect that now, but at the time, of course, couldn't.
I'm not the Holy Spirit, and I can see that. You know what I'm saying? That it doesn't take. This isn't rocket surgery here. You can. For you at the time, obviously you're caught up in this thing, but the elders are all it is for them is crime and punishment. And does whatever you did get to a certain level where they can reach and determine that they have to shun you, they have to disfellowship you. That's all they really care about. It's not that they're not really seeing you, they're seeing what they think you did, and does it measure up to a certain criteria that results in a certain reaction. It's
and
not
can
really
we tick
about
a certain
you.
box?
Yeah,
I don't care about how they look at all that and what criteria they use. But the interesting thing too, Michael, is that the three men who just decided, who took my case, one of them was the gay guy who never had any kids. Well, I shouldn't say the gay guy. Let's assume that's his prerogative to decide.
sure.
But one of them was that male that I told you about before that had never had any
Right.
children.
Mm-hmm.
Another one was a brand new elder that never had any children. He was young and known to be an upstart. And the third elder was another elder who'd never had children himself either. These three men who had never experienced what it's like to have a child, or to have go through what, the difficulties that youth brings. I don't know how to say this, but it's interesting that none of them really were qualified to know anything about domestic violence or anything like that, what I've been through.
No, and even just father-daughter relationships, or
Yeah, exactly. Or understanding, hey, this girl is just missing her dad. Because if there had been a dad there and going, this girl doesn't have her father anymore, there might have been more like, hang on,
I don't know.
she doesn't.
I'm not a dad, and I can see it.
Yeah, I suppose, but it's just I often wonder if there had been a dad on the panel, whether just a little bit more empathy or understanding would have come through. I don't know.
Not if it was my dad. My dad was an elder, and I can tell you now, you weren't getting empathy.
Your dad was an elder?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He was an elder, and there was not an ounce of empathy in that man. He was all about rules and authority and meting out punishment. I don't think. I can't imagine him on a judicial committee. It would have been brutal.
Yeah. Now, just to play devil's advocate, I will say that that one of them at least was a very empathetic person, but their hands are tied, and I guess if they're ticking boxes and and they're thinking, and I wasn't very vocal at that time. I didn't know how to express myself and say what, and they were asking some very personal questions, but I wasn't able to answer them properly, and I was so nervous, and it was embarrassing. It was very embarrassing to have to talk about it. It was just when I think back, it was just a recipe for disaster, in the sense that you just couldn't align dominoes in a worse way for me. Seriously.
Oh, no. You were, that was a really bad scenario. And, there were a few ways that was going to work out well. And honestly, in hindsight, maybe it did work out for the best, but
that saved me, Michael.
Yeah,
Disfellowshipping is the best thing that ever happened to me.
So how did you react to it? What came from that?
Ever happened to me. For about 10 years, I was a good girl. in the terms of the witnesses, whenever I saw a witness, I would run away because I didn't want them to feel bad to have to shun me.
Yeah.
So I actually did them the favor and I hid from them.
Yeah.
Which was horrible, made me so lonely. At the same time, I was still really afraid of worldly people. I didn't trust them. So I had the most, if I was lonely before, Michael, this is 10 times more lonely afterwards. I had absolutely nobody. I had I had one person, luckily, who's now my husband, who I started talking to. He owned a shop, so I'd go to his shop and I started fixing up my mum's garden because I thought, well, I'm going to go crazy if I've got nothing to do. I love gardening. Let me fix her garden. So I'd go to his shop and he would talk to me, but I couldn't trust him because he was worldly.
Yeah.
I trusted nobody else. So for a long time, I was very lonely. After a few months, Mum kept asking me, are you going to come back to meetings? And I refused to go back to meetings. So after about 3 months, she kicked me out of home. So this is when I'm 21.
Wow.
She kicked me out of home. But luckily, I'd made contact with this person at this shop. His name's Tim. And I kept visiting his shop and talking to him. So he was my only friend, basically. He was my only friend in the end. At work, I, again, didn't trust people because obviously from my lesson of getting disfellowshipped, I had to really be cold to people at work to make sure I got in no relationship with anyone at all.
Right.
So I was very distant to everybody at work. And in the end, Tim and I just... He started asking me out, and no, I can't go out with you because I didn't say this to him, but he was worldly, and I have to get back in the organisation. I've got to marry a witness. But in the end, he just persistently asked so many times to go out that I started going out with him, and he was just such a nice guy that going out was just an absolute pleasure, and it was just absolutely lovely to have somebody who was very level-headed, very sensible. He's a businessman, so there's no nonsense, It's just things are as they are, and he just saw the mess that I came out of and decided that he was just going to help me get back on my feet, which was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. How did that feel? That here a worldly person had taken that interest.
Well, I'll be honest, Michael, and I don't mean to be hurtful, but this is how far indoctrination goes, is I was settling for a worldly person. In my view,
yeah, I understand.
I was settling for second best. I hadn't chosen first best, and I was going to die Armageddon, but at least I had second best, and I was going to just do what I could in this world before the end came. Before we died.
That's going to resonate with a lot of people. There are a lot of people who have felt that way.
Yeah, so got married, and slowly, he helped me see it's just a bunch of rubbish. That's not going to happen. The end's not coming.
Right.
For heaven's sakes. And he's very practical, but he's also a person who... Now, I found this really hard at first. Remember how I said to you I was always looking for somebody to cling to?
Yes.
He wouldn't let me do that. No, he wouldn't. No, you've got to stand on your own feet. No, you've got to make your own decisions. No, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. You're only asking me to do that because you can't do that yourself. No, you're on your own. So at first it felt really harsh, but Michael, I think that was the best thing I ever needed.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody to teach me to stand on my own 2 feet.
Yep.
And not to cling to somebody purely because I'm scared.
Yes.
So
that's healthy.
It's healthy. It's definitely healthy. So it's been many years, and I've slowly learned to stand on my 2 feet, And like I said, those scared panic attacks, only come every now and then. Apart from that, it feels like, I'm on my own 2 feet and I'm doing okay.
So how long has it been since you were disfellowshipped at this point?
So I'm 43 and it happened when I was 21. So
oh, wow. Okay.
22 years.
Wow. So
I've been married for about 16 years.
Right.
So there was a period there was pretty dark. But, it's just slowly been getting better and better ever since.
Was the darkness related to the witness stuff?
Yeah, for sure. Loneliness. Just the fact that I was too ashamed to be who I was because I was such a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
And I was too ashamed to tell anybody who I was and what my background was, because I was so ashamed that whenever we told people we were witnesses when we were younger, they'd laugh. They'd think we were crazy door knockers. So I never told anybody. And also, I didn't understand the impact of shunning and what shunning really was. I just thought I was being punished for my bad errors.
Yeah.
So I wasn't able to explain to people, hey, I'm in a shit situation here. I was more thinking, hey, I've been a bad girl. I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm just have to live with the consequences because it was my fault.
Yeah.
That's how I traversed that period. So I never confided in anyone, and I was too ashamed.
Yeah, that's what it's all shame, and it gets back to the guilt is I did a bad thing, shame is I am a bad person, and everything in the organization is moralized to the point where it's not just a thing you did, it's who you are. And you are this awful person, you identify with it, and because they use that, people like you who are disfellowshipped hide from them, because you don't want to make them feel the burden of your shame and how bad you are. But that it's just a tool that they use. It's a tool that a lot of narcissists use to make other human beings cow to their control and their whims. And it's a shame that. I mean, it's an effective
right
tool.
Into their hands,
yeah,
really.
Yeah, well, yeah,
and just because I had no idea, I was so heavily indoctrinated. I thought I was doing a favor to Jehovah.
Sure.
Because I still wanted to please Jehovah. You know what, Jehovah, I'm out here, I'm bad, and yes, you're going to destroy me. But you know what? At least I'm going to show you respect by not breaking your rules about, everything else that you've. Because don't forget, once I got disfellowshipped, I left work and, and did the right thing and then got married. So as far as I could see, everything I'd done right except being reinstated,
Yeah. Yeah,
So I was still trying to please him, but there was something holding me back. I did not want to get reinstated. I just didn't believe it. I don't know why, but something inside was saying, Renee, I just don't feel it's right.
Yeah. I remember.
And I can't put my finger on it.
I remember going to the elders and I was just, I was suicidal. I didn't feel like I was good enough. I didn't feel like I could do all the things that the organization wanted me to do. I just couldn't keep up, especially as a brother. They were always had more and more things they wanted me to do. And I went to the elders in this moment and I told them I wished I could be a fly on the wall of other people's homes and see, like, how did these other brothers who, look like they had it all or look like they were getting it done, how did they do it? Because I just didn't understand how to get it all done. And what they did is they said, well, we all do. Yeah, we all do what we want. You're just making choices that reflects who you really are. And clearly you're a bad person, and it was just this moment of being moralized. And I remember talking to my wife about it later and saying, I guess I don't care enough. And she's like, honey, you're suicidal. You obviously care a lot. Like, you care so much about this that you went to the elders. They didn't come to you. And you're the one carrying this burden and this weight. So obviously you care. And here you have been disfellowshipped. And yet you still cared. So if it all came down to the almighty heart condition that Jehovah's Witnesses and supposedly Jehovah and the Holy Spirit care about, then clearly your heart condition was always in the right place from their, standpoint. So it just shows that it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up on any level. And that's why people walk away with such shame. They're clearly you were repentant, or you wouldn't have carried such shame.
Yeah.
So why did you have to be shunned and disfellowshipped? I thought it was about repentance, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it just really shows how little any of this adds up. And really disfellowshipping at times works against them when, good people like you end up seeing through it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what they say, isn't it? The people who the disfellowshipping sort of wakes you up that the cruelty, it doesn't sit right.
Yep. It's either
it doesn't sit right with a loving organization. It just doesn't work, or a loving God.
Yep. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
So obviously you were out for 20 something, you've been out for 22 years. At what point in that process, because you obviously carried their indoctrination with you for a long time, at what point did you kind of start to wake up, and what helped you wake up?
So it wasn't sudden. It was a very slow process. And I put that down to, I think Mum did a really good job, And so it took a long time for me to really wake up. I would say over several years. But the aha moment, I think, happened when I saw the 2016 shunning video.
Oh, yes.
Because that's how I'd been treated, and they'd never really made it that vocal before. And when you see it in that video, it really brings home how cruel it is. And then I thought to myself, well, I wonder if there's other witnesses who are in my situation. Because I'd never looked on the internet, Michael, because at this point, remember, I'm still a good girl. I won't look at apostate stuff.
Yep.
So I thought, I wonder if there's other people who've seen this video on the internet and what they think of it, who are disfellowshipped, and bang. I mean, that one search just opened up all the Facebook sites and everybody just vocally saying, this is so cruel, this is so not. And you know what, XJW sites, they don't hold back. So I just all of a sudden saw all these people and I went, oh my goodness, I am not the only one. It was amazing. Because don't forget, when you're disfellowshipped, you think, and it's by design, the fact that they shun you and you don't get to speak to anybody else again, and they frighten you from speaking to apostates, it's a perfect design because you think you're the only one.
Yep, they keep you alone. You're still isolated.
Yeah, so when I found all these people and, and then straight after that, that was just the most frightening part of my life because I saw the Royal Commission. I started reading about that. And that, that spiraling effect of, oh my God, it feels like my feet or the floor beneath me has given way. It felt like a trapdoor had opened and I was falling through. I just had, no idea. Oh my God, is it possible that this is all a lie? That was only about, 2016 video. So 2 years ago?
Yeah,
because I saw it after the convention.
Yeah.
So
and you had been out for 20 years, right? At that point, about 20 years.
Yeah, wow. For sure. So that's at that point when I found your podcast, and that helped me just to calm my farm, because at this point my head was just buzzing in all directions and I was feeling sick. And then with your podcast, I started hearing other people actually tell their story, and it just, man, just hearing other people express their pain and crying and online to you and just saying how lonely they'd been and how depressed and it just, I went, oh my goodness, I basically found people that validated my story. My story is true. It isn't a lie. It truly is an evil thing that has been done to me. It's not me that is bad. It is something that has been done to me. And just that realization, I don't know, that's worth $1 million, that right there.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons that I started this I did obviously this JW Life first. One of the reasons that I put it out and then that I eventually I transitioned over to Shunned was that I felt so alone for so long. And I thought that if we could put other people's stories out, including my own, that it might help other people to not feel so alone, because it's just loneliness is just one of the worst feelings a human can have. It's just awful. And
Yeah.
it just sinks you to the depths of despair. And I remember the moment when I first went online and started reading on forums, and it was like, oh my goodness, all the things that I see, there are all these other people that see as well. I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one that sees this. And yeah, it's just to be able to know that you're not alone is just, it's as bad as feeling alone is, knowing that you're not alone after feeling alone is just as good. It's just an amazing feeling.
Yeah, for sure. So that happened about 2 or 3 years ago. And before that, I had started working, Michael, because my husband is an atheist, and he's very Australian as well. So whenever I'd, voice a doubt, maybe, this and that, he'd just burst out laughing. To him, it was just ludicrous. He's just going, for heaven's sakes, are you hearing yourself? So just the fact of his reactions, as well, that started to wake me. So before I found the shunning video, I'd already started looking at science and the evolution process, and that was really comforting too, just to see that the evolutionary process is just black and white. It's out there. It's documented. It was just marvelous to see that and feel like maybe I'm not that crazy. Maybe there is an element of the witnesses that isn't quite right. But I still believed in Jehovah because I was still afraid of dying at Armageddon.
Yeah, that fear.
Every time there was a storm, I'd run to my kids and I'd go and sit with them. I wouldn't tell them because I didn't want to frighten them, but I would say in my head, this is it, we're going to die, and I just want to be near them, when it happens, that sort of thing. And looking out at the sky, stormy skies before a storm would really, really frighten me. And so that all happened, but that's disappeared now. The Armageddon fear has disappeared. Awesome. Because as you read and as you wake more and more, slowly, it just becomes a ludicrous, fanciful thing, doesn't it? It's just
when you step away from it all, it's like you lived in a fairy tale for a long time.
Yeah, and that's encouraging for your listeners too, because they need to know. A lot of them suffer with that, and it will pass. Eventually it will pass, especially with reading and researching and just keep. I think, to be honest, it mostly passed when I started telling my story, when I started getting my stories out there and telling my version of what I'd experienced slowly. And I do want to say this to all the listeners there, Michael, if that's all right, is that telling my story was the single biggest thing that has impacted my healing and made my healing so much better. So if I think about the healing that I've gone through in the last 2 years since I started my page compared to the previous 20 years, it's reverse. It feels like I've done 20 years worth of healing in these last 2 years, simply because I've gained the strength and felt that I was important enough to let people know this is what's happened to me, and the more you do that, as you do that, what happens is you start to reinforce what you believe and how you feel, and it's just an incredibly powerful thing to do, and I really recommend people do it.
Yeah, because you're shedding light on that, on the shame and the fear. Shame and fear live in the darkness, and when you can shine the light on them and see that there's really nothing there, they start to lose their power. And by telling your story, you're shining a light on what happened to you, and it starts to lose its power. You start to take your power back.
That's exactly right. Yeah. That's exactly right. I used to be absolutely petrified of witnesses. So when I saw them, especially elders, and it's probably would still be the case now. If I saw them, I'd go all jittery and nervous, and or even when I see a cart, I wouldn't be able to speak to them because I knew I'd turn into a jittering mess. But I'm feeling as I'm progressing through my healing, that power is starting to dissipate, and I'm starting to look at them more like victims themselves now, rather than people who have a say on how I should live my life, or people who have a right to judge who I am, or people who have a right to make me feel worthless. That's starting to disconnect and disappear, and now I'm viewing it more as, you know, people who are really in a situation that they need help, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
it totally turns the tables. Like you said, that power that they had over you, it dissipates. It truly does.
Yeah.
And that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. You know, it's like when you go to elementary school and then you go back later on in life, and, you know, elementary school seemed like this huge place. And then you go later in life with a little perspective, and, you know, your elementary school probably wasn't really that big. It just seemed big because of where you were in life.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. You know, the elders, they were these pillars of the congregation. They were these huge authority figures. And then when you realize that everything they have was built on a house of cards, you know, it's just lies and fear and manipulation, you start to realize that, no, they're just kind of sad little men who, you know, really kind of need some help.
Caught up in this.
Yeah. They're caught up in this thing that's way bigger than them.
And that's another thing too that woke me up, Michael, is in the 19 years before I woke up, in the 20 years, I had never had an elder come to visit me. So you know how they always said in the meetings, you know, we try and get lost ones back. I had never had an elder come. The only 2 times that they came was about 5 years into it. My mum sent one because nobody had come to see me. And then about a year ago, I told my mum, you know, on the few occasions that she does let me communicate with her, that, you know, Mum, they never came to see me. If Jehovah truly wants me back, if he truly loves me and is looking over me, how can he let 20 years pass and not one elder comes to see me? And so then she sent another one to come and visit me. But
watch what you ask for.
Show you, doesn't that show you that Jehovah is not looking out for you?
No.
He's not doing that. It's all made up, because I am a very sincere person. Like, I don't want to put tickets on myself, but I'm living a fairly decent life with a little family and young kids. Why wouldn't they come? Why wouldn't Jehovah come and try and restore me back? And it's just because it's not true.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. Again, gets back to that sincerity, you know. You obviously cared a lot. You carried this with you for a long time. And once again, where was Jehovah? Where was he in your judicial committee? And where was he for 20 years afterward? You know, it's because he doesn't exist. You know, it's just not.
Yeah, and if somebody did try and make me come back earlier, you know, it might have been more successful. But just that cruelty and that nastiness is something that has certainly assured me that I would never, ever consider going back, not in a million years.
Yeah, and
why would you want to be part?
And Jehovah's Witnesses will say things like, well, you know, it's just human imperfection or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, why would God allow that to happen? What, you know, he seems pretty concerned about how he's viewed and how he's put out there. So why would he allow that to happen? And, you know, it's just because it's just not true. So you still have some contact, at least, it sounds like a minimal with your mom.
So I haven't seen my 3 brothers for 20 years.
Wow.
I saw one at McDonald's once, and he saw me and quickly jumped in his car and took off.
Wow.
Another one tried to make contact with me and he sent me a text, hey, look, why don't we meet and have coffee? And I said, look, if you're trying to get me back, I'm just sort of, you know, I'm not coming back, but I'd love to have coffee with you. And he said, oh, don't worry about it then.
Oh, good grief. Wow.
And then my mum uses my children as an excuse to have contact, and I know how you feel about that, Michael, and how others feel about it. Everybody feels different.
Sure.
And I allow her to do that. I am into mine. Sometimes I think, no, I'm not going to let you, but do you know, when I die, I'm going to say, or when she dies, I will be able to say I was always kind. And that's my motto. At the end of the day, I am always going to be kind to her.
Yeah.
So that nobody can ever turn around and say, you know, well, you did this and you did that. No, I've always left the door open. And so she sees my kids every now and then. I try and I usually get a hug out of that, which is beautiful from her, and she gives me the most desperately beautiful, tearful hug because she really wants to save me and she just can't seem to manage how to do it.
Yeah.
And every now and then I send a text of the kids' pictures and things like that, and so we have minimal contact, which is lovely, but she often reminds me it has to stay minimal. I don't want to jeopardize my relationship with Jehovah. I don't want to jeopardize my opportunity at everlasting life.
Right.
So I can't see you.
Yeah.
Please come back. Her words are always, please come back. It's you know, it's you. You are holding the family up. You're the one who is causing all this heartache. If only you would stop being so stubborn and just come back. In actual fact, one time she even said, so what if you don't believe it? Just tell the elders that you want to come back and be with your family and just pretend just so that we can all be together. And, you know, I honestly thought about it several times. I could just pretend, just go to the meetings and just pretend and be with my family again. And I just, after about 10 seconds of thinking about it, I just cannot be so disingenuous. I cannot lie. I cannot pretend. It's just not in me. It makes me feel sick.
Who taught you to be truthful?
Makes me feel sick.
Right.
Yeah. At the thought that I would try and manipulate the situation. Yeah, I just can't do it.
Well, you'd be selling yourself out on a level. Yeah. Just sell yourself out on a level. Do something that none of them are willing to do. Yeah.
Integrity is just so much more important.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I am such a more honest person since I've left. The lies and things I had to do to get away with things or hide things, or, you know, not that I was trying, but whenever I was in trouble, especially, I just felt like I was continually looking for a way out. I was definitely duplicitous to try and make things, you know, just to manipulate things. So it wasn't really a lie, and it wasn't really bad, but I could kind of get away with it because it was grey area. You know, all that nonsense and all that evil stuff that you worry about, I can now just be me, and I can be truthful, and I can do what I want. I can make my own decisions because I'm me. I don't have to think about any other policies, procedures, expectations, judgments from anybody.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, that was a bit of a rant.
No, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful rant. Authenticity is one of the most important things you can have. If you have to sell yourself out to do a thing, it's just not it's not worth it. It's one of the reasons we have so much depression in the world, is because people are living inauthentically.
I just feel that, like, not that I was a really dishonest person, but there were so many little things and little rules that if you could slightly bend them, you could get your way.
Yeah.
So that
your mom is now
putting your hours in.
Yeah.
You slightly adjust your hours, and you kind of, I think it kind of right, but I don't really know because I didn't really record it properly. But I think, and I don't want to undersell myself, so I think I did 12, not really 11. And that whole time you're just worried the whole time that you're being disingenuous or you know, all that trauma is gone. All that stress is gone.
You're living in an unreasonable cult that serves what they put forth as a fairly unreasonable God, and you have to bend things and lie. I think Jehovah's Witnesses create amazing liars because you have to play a part. You're playing roles to fit in. And it's you're not being true to yourself. And once you start selling yourself out in that way, you know, what's another lie? Because I'm already lying to myself. What's one more? And it's just that snowball that rolls downhill and gets bigger and bigger. Next thing you know, you know, cognitive dissonance. You're lying to yourself because you can't hold two things that oppositional ideas at the same time, and it's a horrible life. It really is.
It is, isn't it?
It is.
If only people understood that who were in it. There's so much freedom when you leave. There's so much freedom to how you live. It's incredible.
Yeah, and you don't have to, one lie always leads to the next lie, and then you have to cover for the first lie, and you have to remember all these things. I don't have to remember all this stuff anymore. I'm not lying to anybody, so
that's right.
You live in integrity.
It's a freedom, isn't it? It's amazing. Yeah.
So, how does your past life still impact you today, 20 something years later, 22 years later? Where are you at in your journey today? I know you've got some activism too, so I want to make sure we get to that a bit, but how does it impact you?
So I think the biggest thing I struggle with is feeling like I'm good enough. So that emerges in my work. So I run a department at work. I'm a head of mathematics in a large high school. And no matter what job I've had and I've changed, and this proves that changing isn't the answer, just like changing schools wasn't the answer, is that I always doubt my abilities and doubt what I can do. And I know people think I do a great job, but I'm impossible to please it's impossible to please me. So does that make sense? Like I find it, whatever I do is not good enough.
Sure.
So
perfectionism.
I think that's a residual of my past that I have to learn to live with and to work with.
Mm-hmm.
That scared feeling still follows me. I do think that sometimes I get very scared, and I don't know what that feeling is. It comes out in the form of panic attacks, as if, it feels like, I was saying to somebody the other day, as if a lion's about to pounce me, but I don't know why or how. It's just this horrendous fear comes over me, so I have to manage that. And I do that with managing panic attacks. The way you do that is controlling your breathing and just reassuring yourself and making sure that what you say in your head's right. And I probably need to see a therapist because I have avoided seeing a therapist, because I think it's taken me so long to understand what is my problem. I think now I would be able to tell a therapist, what my problem is. But I don't know if I've answered your question.
And where are you in your journey now? Like, I know you're an activist yourself. You're obviously the life as one of Jehovah's Witnesses it doesn't just go away. And I know that you're now helping other people. So, what do you do?
Yeah, so like you, about 2 years ago, my biggest sadness of my journey was how lonely I was. So I decided to create a page and just share the emotional side of what you go through, growing up as a witness and leaving. And that was been my biggest way of sharing my story. And a lot of people on there follow, and that's Renee Cordeschi, which is my maiden name, JW Survivor, I called it. And so I just share stories on there, and that's been my voice. Like I said, that's been my healing voice. But now you sort of have a choice at a point where you can either let it go and walk away and improve your life, and that's totally, wonderful for people who do that and valuable and valid. But there's also the choice of remaining and staying to help others. Because I just keep thinking of all the kids like me that are in it. If somebody had put their hand out and said, Renee, we're here for you, and really that's my hope, is that one day we'll be there for the kids. In actual fact, Paul Grundy and I are working on a website that's actually to support people who are thinking about leaving, just a portal for them to land on, to say, hey, these are your actual options. You're not alone. So number one is feeling like you're not alone. And the second thing is helping people heal. The most important thing I want to go towards is getting through to authorities that shunning is not on, that this business is not on. There's been a lot of work done with the sexual abuse victims, and that's fantastic, and there's a lot more to do. but I feel that there's a lot of people who have suffered, not through sexual abuse, but through shunning. And I feel like there's work to do in getting authorities to understand the damage that has been done. And there's like 1 million people who have been disfellowshipped in the last 20 years worldwide. So it's not a small issue. It's actually quite a large issue.
Absolutely.
And that's why one of the tools to do that is a protest that I'm organising for November in Melbourne, the biggest ever protest, hopefully, as well as reunion. I understand that not everybody's protests are not everybody's cup of tea. So we're organising the biggest reunion as well, just so that lots of witnesses, former witnesses, can be together and share stories and heal as well, as well as those who want to express their suffering through a protest. Yeah. Because there's going to be 50,000 Jehovah's Witnesses expected at Marvel Stadium in Melbourne. So we're just very peacefully, respectfully going to protest that shunning does kill, shunning is inhumane, and hopefully get some media attention so that we can start the ball rolling to get heard, to get people to understand, and the public, that former Jehovah's Witnesses need a hand.
Yeah, obviously anything that exposes the cruelty of shunning to the light is something that I wholeheartedly support. And I just want to say, personally, your writing is beautiful, and I really enjoy the Renee Cordeschi page. I will post a link to it in the show notes. And I think that you're very vulnerable in some of the stories that you share, and you carry that sincerity that you have expressed throughout your entire story here. That sincerity is shown on your page as well, and you are doing good work, and you do help people already. So you should feel good about that.
Oh, that's lovely, Michael. But there's a lot more to do. But yeah, no, I will take that compliment. Thank you, because as witnesses, we're very terrible at taking compliments.
I understand. I have a hard time with it too sometimes.
Yeah. But no, it's been lovely doing that page, because not only my vulnerability, but then a lot of other people share their stories, and you just go, wow. I mean, and there's beautiful people out there that have had the most horrendous experiences, and we're all in it together, and it's just lovely to be able to hear each other, and validate each other and support each other, It's just fantastic.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, so you've obviously been out for quite some time. What do you enjoy, I'll say, about your new life, and I'm going to add the caveat, what do you enjoy about your new life since, fully waking up, and kind of what dreams do you have for your new life?
I really enjoy the fact that I don't have to be afraid, of a God that has been very cruel, in the past. I have the freedom to make a decision about whether I believe if he exists even or not. I have a freedom to make my own choices in life and not to feel guilty for any reason. I have a freedom to show kindness. I have opportunity to show kindness in a way that helps others genuinely, not knocking on doors and trying to convert them, but a genuine wanting to help others who struggle, and that's really, really rewarding. What was the second question?
Oh, what dreams do you have for this life? I mean, I know you've got a son, and he's a great piano player. I've seen your videos that you've posted, and got your husband, and what do you want for your life?
My dreams, I do have a beautiful little family, and they're kids that have had the opportunity to just be themselves. I have absolutely loved helping them grow up, and hopefully, in much better conditions than I did. It's just been wonderful to see them decide who they are, what they love, and to follow their passions, and that's just been absolutely fantastic. I've got 2 boys, one, like you said, who's a musician, and he's been able to follow that passion so much so that he's been able to work with composers, and he's had a little job himself, even though he's 15, for a little documentary. He's actually flying, and there's nothing stopping him. And my other boy is also a musician and loves sport, and he trains 4 days a week, and he just absolutely loves going there. It's just wonderful to see him have the time to put towards a passion and not be held back or made to feel bad for it. So it's just wonderful living. I guess I'm living my childhood through theirs, you know. And my hope for me is to find happiness, Michael, at the end of the day. It feels like I've grabbed maybe happiness's big toe. If I'm chasing happiness, I think I've grabbed the big toe, and I'm just looking forward to grabbing the rest of it and finding ways to use my past in a way to learn from, but not to let it hold me back.
Yeah, absolutely. Happiness is what we all want in life.
Yeah. Happiness, to be able to lose those fears, that scared feeling I get, that would be fantastic to get rid of that fear.
Yeah.
And just being able to, enjoy every single day. And I think I'm on the way. I'm definitely on the way. Yeah.
Well, you do really good work, and I think that what you've done has probably helped others define happiness. It sounds like you know, with your kids, you're helping your kids define happiness. And so it's Renee's turn. Let's get Renee, on that path too, and that'd be amazing.
The happy voucher.
Yeah.
I need the happy voucher. But no, before you go to Michael, I wanted to also just acknowledge there's people out there that are working for this movement. I'm going to call it a movement because it does feel like almost like the civil rights movement, because there's so many different people who are doing different things and it all helps. Yep. I just want to acknowledge the people who are doing a lot and don't get noticed. They're working in the background. Some of these people are working really hard with legal matters, or working with authorities such as the children's governance authorities, or what's the word I'm looking for, with the charity commissions and things like that. There's people that are working, and this is for your listeners, there's people that are working really hard for you to try and get your story out there that you've been treated really unfairly. And they sometimes go unnoticed. A lot of them go unnoticed. So there's people out there that are working hard and they need to be acknowledged as well.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I can't. I don't always know who they are.
I'll tell you why I'm not mentioning names. I'm going to tell you why I'm not mentioning names is because they want to remain underground because, as you know, a lot of people who are known are getting subpoenas and all sorts of injunctions and chased. And so these people want to stay anonymous So, but it's just what I'm saying to your listeners. It's really encouraging to know that there's a lot of tenacious people out there who will stop at at nothing almost, and to make sure that everybody shares their story, because it all adds to the work we're doing.
Yeah. So we'll shout out to all the people out there who are doing good work, whether they're on a video or a podcast, or whether they're behind the scenes doing legal matters, or if you're just a person. I'm sorry, I was going to say, if you're just a person who's on a forum or a Facebook group supporting somebody else, we all help each other. Yeah,
exactly. A kind comment, or even some people send letters to their local members of parliament, or they do things that we don't know about, but it's important that they do these things, that we all add a little bit, because it all helps.
Yeah, it does. I mean, when you think about our lives as Jehovah's Witnesses, a lot of it was death by 1,000 cuts. There were so many little ways we were compromised over time that led to us giving up who we were. And here on the outside at this point, it's kind of death by a thousand cuts. We can, with all of our voices, help. I'm not sure I believe that Jehovah's Witnesses will ever go away, but this personally, but I do believe that, there is death by a thousand cuts. So if you can help one person out there to feel less alone or whatever the case, and there's a million of us out here and we could all just help one person, imagine, what the effect of that would be. And so, we all just do our best and put ourselves out.
Yeah, exactly. And just one last thought too is don't sit back as well and think, others have it under control, because what you do and your style, like you said, you might help one person, but your voice, or even something as simple as your skin color or the way you talk will, on a video, let's say, attracts a certain person that would not have been attracted to anybody else, So it's important that we all put out something out there, because it will help somebody. Yeah,
in business, how many cleaning businesses are out there, and yet you could go start a cleaning business tomorrow. Why? Because the fact that there are other people out there doing it already proves that there's a market for it. That's a business principle.
Yeah.
You don't shy away from it because someone else is doing it. Now they've proven there's a market for it. And the same goes with all of this, any kind of activism and putting your stories out there. People want and need this. And so having another person out there doing it is great. It helps so many people. Between all
and
of
the person doing it.
Yes.
And the person doing it.
Yes. Yeah. If nothing else, do it for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I've really, appreciated getting to know you and your story. And I really hope that it helps others out there. I thank you also for your vulnerability in some of the things that you discussed, because that is people again need to know that they're not alone, and in discussing things in a vulnerable way and being honest and being open and being courageous, you help other people out there to know that they're not alone, because there are things that we don't always talk about, and they need to be talked about because somebody out there needs to hear it. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thanks so much. And it's been an absolute honor to be on your show, because, it's just a fantastic show. So I'm really grateful.
I want to thank Renee for being so open about her life. She was very vulnerable, and I think I speak for many in wanting to give her one of those hugs that she wanted. It's such a simple thing, but to somebody that's been in such a volatile world growing up, living with fear that creeps up on them, a hug can make all the difference in the world in a moment. So I think we all send our hugs. If you want to leave a message of support for Renee, to get resources mentioned in the episode, to donate to the show, reach out for therapeutic and life-changing personal coaching, find out when the next Shunned Recovery Project group meeting is, or just buy a t-shirt, go to shunnedpodcast.com and it's all there. You can probably get a lot of it right from your podcast app in the description. Thank you to everybody that makes this happen financially by showing support for this work. I want to thank Lisa and Jen for signing up to help recently. If it's something that you appreciate, please consider making a donation at patreon.com/shunned. Thank you to everybody that leaves 5-star reviews on iTunes for Shunned or This JW Life. It really helps. And I mentioned last time that I'm going to be speaking in New York City at the When Rights and Religions Collide conference. If you want to join me there, go to rightsandreligions.com and you can pick up your tickets. That will be on October the 19th. Now, on Sunday, October the 20th, I want to meet you if you're in the area. I'll be in New York City for that weekend. I'm organizing a meetup on that day, so go to Facebook and you can find the event as Shunned Podcast New York City Meetup. We'll discuss it there and make plans to meet. And originally, my wife Jenny wasn't going to be able to make it, but she's coming now too, so we both love to meet as many of you as we can. While you're on Facebook, join the Shunned Podcast Facebook group. We have a lot of fun in there and really productive discussions and supporting one another. I announce the new days and times each week for the Shunned Recovery Project online meetups. You can also get those by going to shunnedrecoveryproject.com or on the shunnedpodcast.com website. And lastly, my goal with everything I do here is to help people recover from these cults. I want to remove barriers to getting help as much as I can with different options. So I've literally opened up my calendar and posted it up where you can get therapeutic coaching sessions for as little as $25 and choose your own day and time. You can get a half hour or book 2 back-to-back and get a full hour if you want, or whatever suits you. You can literally see what times are available and book yourself. It's very easy. The link is right there on the shunnedpodcast.com website in the coaching page. I'm also sharing it to the Facebook group each week so that people can pick and choose what fits them. Maybe you don't want to commit to a weekly session. Maybe something popped up in your life and you need somebody to bounce it off of. Maybe you want a weekly session but can't afford an hour, so you want a half hour, but it allows you to talk more frequently by doing so every week. Whether you just feel stuck or having a rough time, or whether you're in a good place and want to reach for your dreams, you don't have to do it alone, and I've made it very simple to jump in and out of these sessions as you need. Again, just go to shunnedpodcast.com and go to the coaching page, and there's a button you can click there, and the calendar's right there. Pick and choose what fits you, and let's do something better in life. I hope to meet more of you and to help you find the life you want, or just figure out what that life even looks like. The music for the podcast, as always, is No Hell Yet by Fair Voyeur. And until I see you next time, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.
We'll curse God.